Hello and welcome to the Blood Red channel for our live Champions League group stage watch along for the third successive year here on the Blood Red channel. We are going to bring you the draw live and give you our reaction immediately as it happens as to who the Reds draw for the first stage of the Champions League for this season. Alongside me, Matt Addison and Theo Squires. Chaps, thanks for joining me. And I suppose the Premier League season hasn't started all too well, Matt, but hopefully this Champions League draw goes a bit better.
Yeah, hopefully a bit better than it went last year as well. I mean, obviously the troubles that they had with all of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's been a difficult start to the season. But we always know with Liverpool, they have a chance of winning the Premier League. They've always now got a chance of winning the Champions League as well. And it is almost their competition, isn't it? It's the one that you kind of look forward to playing some different teams in. There's lots of interesting ties that Liverpool could get in terms of sort of who they can get. And I'm sure we'll go through all of those before the draw takes place. But yeah, it's a bit of an opportunity, I think, for something different, something to take our minds off what's been a tough start to the Premier League season. If we get an interesting draw for Liverpool today in this, then suddenly we can start to look forward to quite a few matches on quite a few consecutive weeks as well. It's obviously a bit more condensed this season because of the World Cup and all the rest of it. But yeah, glad to have something other than Liverpool's midfield to be talking about.
Yeah, the Champions League to get underway from the week beginning the 5th of September this year, and the group stage concludes on the 2nd of November. So, as Matt said there, a very reduced and condensed Champions League group stage schedule for this year. Theo, last year, I mean, we'll talk about we'll go through the pot shortly and talk about dream scenarios and dreaded scenarios. But last year, AC Milan, Atletico Madrid, and Porto in the group. It wasn't probably the easiest of group Liverpool could have got, but in the end, they won all 6 games.
Yeah, it was the group of death when it came out, wasn't it? So many European Cup wins between these teams or final appearances, and you thought it was going to be tough. Like Liverpool played Atletico a number of times in recent years, and it's not gone their way. It's been difficult, and you knew that was going to be the case again. I think they made it a bit challenging when they went to Spain, but they got through the group. I'm not going to say it was too straightforward, but it was decent enough. Like there was a couple of comebacks in there. We had a couple of scares, but we managed to get the results. And it was a rare situation where they were pretty much done with 2 games to go, and they could put all the kids out at the San Siro to give them a great experience. But that's the thing about the competition; it's unpredictable. Like Real Madrid, didn't they lose to one of the minnows in the group stages? And it's like, they're going to run out of luck sooner or later, and they're the team that's coming into it as European champions. If you get a group of death, Liverpool could win all 6 again, but then they could end up with like the easiest group ever, and there'd be an upset. It's going to be harder this year as well, with it being back-to-back in these game weeks. Like Doyley's done a piece today saying that it's basically the group stage is over when you're normally at the halfway point this season. So injury-wise, it's going to be hard for Liverpool to get players back. But if you've got like a really tough away day where you're travelling halfway across the continent, and then whilst you might be spared like the 12:30 kickoff on a Saturday, as Klopp has usually bemoaned, there's still going to be a very tight turnaround. It's one where you want Liverpool squad to be at its strongest, to be everyone available so you can balance these games, spin these plates. And Liverpool just don't have that at the moment. So avoid the group of death, but you can't take anything for granted.
No, definitely. Right, let's look at the pots and see who is in which pot. Pot 1 is where Real Madrid, the champions, of course, Eintracht Frankfurt having won the Europa League, Man City, AC Milan, Bayern Munich, PSG, Porto, and Ajax are all in. Liverpool can draw any one of those sides apart from Manchester City. Of course, domestic sides kept apart from one another at this stage of the competition. Into pot 2 is where we will find Liverpool alongside Chelsea, Barcelona, Juventus, Atletico Madrid, Sevilla, RB Leipzig, and Tottenham. Liverpool, of course, can't draw any of those sides there in pot 2 themselves. They can draw any side in pot 3: Borussia Dortmund, Red Bull Salzburg, Shakhtar Donetsk, Inter Milan, Napoli, Benfica, Sporting Lisbon, and Bayer Leverkusen. And finally, pot 4 is Rangers, Dinamo Zagreb, Marseille, Copenhagen, Club Brugge, Celtic, Victoria Pilsen, and Maccabi Haifa. I mean, we'll go into the chat box and ask those who are watching what the dream and dreaded scenarios are. But Theo, yourself, looking at that, pot 1 looks fairly strong, but to me, I think pot 2 looks the strongest.
Yeah, that's always the case, though, isn't it? Like, you've got these big teams that have been doing it in Europe time and time again. They're the ones who are top of the coefficients. They're the ones who are in pot 2. You've got your league winners in pot 1, and obviously Man City probably best team in England, best team in Europe. Real Madrid, great giants. AC Milan finally back in the big time. We know what Bayern and PSG are like. But it's going to be more consistent in pot two, where those are the teams that get into the quarterfinals, semi-finals every single year, as opposed to like Ajax, who, although great the year Liverpool won it in 2019, they're not like these giants that we see in it every single season. And Eintracht Frankfurt as Europa League winners, it makes it a bit different. But yeah, looking at pot one, there's obvious teams you want to avoid, isn't it? You don't want Real Madrid again. I think we're sick of Real Madrid now. Every time Liverpool get drawn against them, you think, oh, finally now they can put that demon to bed. They can get some revenge, and they just get rolled over. So let's not get Real Madrid this time. Don't particularly want Bayern Munich. I don't want a Sadio Mane reunion just yet. He's top goal scorer in the Bundesliga, so maybe that one can wait a little later in the competition where Liverpool found some form. But if we're talking reunions, wouldn't mind another trip to San Siro, see Divock Origi. That would be okay. Like, you should have enough to beat AC Milan if last year was anything to go by. But there's no easy teams at this stage. It's why it's the Champions League. We're looking at pot one. These are the champions.
Yeah, no, definitely. Matt, what about pot three then? I mean, there are some big sides in there, but Liverpool surely would feel confident against the vast majority, no?
Yeah, I think so. I think Dortmund and Inter are the two that you probably wouldn't fancy in there. We've seen Liverpool fairly straightforwardly get past Red Bull Salzburg in the past. I think Benfica, Napoli, they could be quite difficult, but you'd expect Liverpool to come out on top. I think similar to what Theo said about Real Madrid, Liverpool seem to have played Napoli a fair bit, so I'd quite like to avoid them, maybe change that up a bit and get somebody else. Maybe Sporting, I think they're a team that has got one or two decent players, but possibly Liverpool would fairly comfortably, you'd imagine, be able to get through that. And Bayer Leverkusen, similarly, I think an interesting team, one or two decent players that have come through there in recent times. But I think Liverpool should be fairly comfortable with those teams. I think Liverpool should be fairly comfortable, of course, with any of these teams, given that they're in pot three. But I think Dortmund and Inter would be the two that you wouldn't probably want to face. And yeah, even Shakhtar, I think that could be a tricky one potentially. So yeah, some interesting teams in there, but ultimately I think what we say with pretty much all of the teams in the draw is that they will probably not want to face Liverpool more than Liverpool wouldn't want to face them.
Yeah, no, definitely. And pot four, I mean, in pot three, Shakhtar are in there, Theo. They're going to be playing their home games this year in Warsaw in Poland. But there are a few teams, including Shakhtar, who Liverpool haven't faced in European competition. Dynamo Zagreb, Victoria Plzen and Copenhagen, three of those four, all in pot four. Anyone in particular in pot four you'd have your eye on? I mean, a few people immediately drawn to kind of Rangers and Celtic, kind of Battle of Britain scenarios.
Was it Zagreb who dumped Spurs out of Europa League a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one where teams, they can get upset. So I think it was Victoria Plzen who got the upset against Real Madrid that I mentioned earlier in the group stages. I'm drawn to those same teams, the Battle of Britain, Rangers versus or Celtic. We've not had them in the Champions League group stages for a while. It's a nice, easy in terms of geography away day. It's going to be a good atmosphere. And it's one where the crowd's just going to be up for it, both home and away. If it had to be a bit further afield, I wouldn't mind Club Brugge. It's not the worst away day either. And it's a reunion with Simon Mignolet. Even then, like Marseille wouldn't be too bad. Again, only on the other side of the channel. It's when you get to pot four, it's looking at the geography, isn't it? And how that falls into the fixture list. You want something that isn't the most strenuous turnaround, that means that players can be well rested and then go again at the weekend after it.
Yeah, no, definitely. We are getting closer then to the draw coming around. And looking in the chat box, a few people getting involved saying what they want. Greenland here saying Real Madrid, Inter Milan and Celtic. Matt, thoughts on that one?
Yeah, that'd be an interesting one, wouldn't it? I think for me, Rangers and Celtic, as much as those would be kind of, I mean, they're local, I suppose that's one advantage, but I just would kind of like to avoid the sort of difficulties of going and playing against those teams. Obviously, the Champions League is there for those big ties and the big occasions, and Liverpool certainly in those two matches would be overwhelming favourites. But I think maybe just make themselves a little bit of an easier task in the group stage. Maybe save one or two of the bigger teams for later down the line. I think that would be my ideal scenario, to be honest. But yeah, I can see the appeal of a few of those teams in pot four. I mean, there's maybe not quite so many big names or names that you'd kind of think that Liverpool would particularly struggle against. But I think Marseille could be a tricky one. Bruges, Theo mentioned before, obviously, a couple of links there. There's a few decent players as well that tend to get linked from them to the Premier League quite often. So it'd be quite interesting to have a look at one or two of those. But yeah, for me, it's as simple as easy a draw as possible. I think for Liverpool, that can help them. Obviously, they need as much help as they can get in the Premier League at the moment. But I think that would be my favoured sort of way of looking at it.
We've got a couple here, Theo. Frankfurt, Benfica, and Maccabi, or another one, Sporting, Rangers, and Leverkusen. I mean, certainly that group we've got on screen there would have some glamour to it with some of the names as well, albeit would be fairly favourable.
Yeah, imagine Darwin Núñez would get an interesting reception in Lisbon with Sporting, Benfica's rivals. But hang on, Sporting and Leverkusen in the same pot. If we just
they are. I've just realised that they when I took that off screen, realised they are in the same pot. So that couldn't happen. Yeah.
Oh, you're as bad as UEFA last year, guy.
Yeah. Let's not get into that.
But yeah, it's like you want these ones where there's a bit of a story there, a bit of a narrative to make it interesting. Maybe a player that Liverpool have been looking at and interested in. We've seen a couple of auditions in recent years with it, Minamino or Núñez. But as Matt said, someone they can just put a few goals past and make it as straightforward as possible. You don't want the horrible away days, and you don't want the ones that are going to just be an upset on the cards. But in terms of being a big name, just have to follow these pots as they're coming through again now to make sure we don't have any more slip-ups. But yeah, Leverkusen, you got good memories of playing them in recent years, and Champions League, you've got good memories of playing Marseille when Rafa Benitez was in charge. There's plenty of teams here where you think of those European away days, even in group stages at home, you think, I've got good memories of them. Liverpool can do them quite comfortably. And you just want Jurgen Klopp's side to get a few more in there. Like I've been seeing today, like the leading goal scorers in Champions League history, Mohamed Salah's certainly working his way up that list. Like we know he's nearing the top of the Liverpool scoring charts in the Prem at the moment. But yeah, he could climb that list if he has another good run. He was superb in the group stages last year, and the goals dried up a bit after Christmas. But there's no reason why he can't be a top scorer with a healthy group. And then maybe finally he can make a proper charge for this Ballon d'Or that he's so clearly after.
Yeah, no, definitely. Michael Harris asking, when does the draw actually start? It is
Good question.
About to get, it is getting ever closer. They handed over to the studio. We'll have the awards and the ceremony to go before. I would hope inside the next 10 minutes or so we will start seeing some of the teams coming out of it. But we will, of course, get it all explained to us. The fact that sides from the same country can't draw one another, and the fact of how they all get split up between who and where they can be drawn and get underway. But we are getting closer to the draw beginning. But Matt, it's one of those, isn't it, with these things, if UEFA just love to drag it out.
Yeah, they managed to do it, especially so last season, didn't they? They like to drag it out, but then they had to do it again. So fingers crossed they managed to get it right this time around. It was an interesting one, wasn't it, last year? But yeah, I mean, there's so many complications and rules and all of that sort of thing. I'm sure they will very shortly go through those. They've not even started doing that yet. So for anyone in the comments that's panicking that you're missing out, don't worry. We will tell you as soon as it does start. It just, as ever with these things, it does take a little bit of time, doesn't it? I think it normally takes around 45 minutes, doesn't it, once we get started to kind of go through it, like you mentioned, the awards and all the rest of it. But yeah, as long as they do it right first time around, that's the main thing.
Yeah,
Start's never interesting either, is it? We're just finding out pot one teams in which groups they're in. It's like, who are they going to play? Doesn't matter yet.
Yeah, no, exactly. But in terms of, we've spoken about dream scenarios. What about dreaded scenarios then, Theo? What would be the worst group for Liverpool to draw? I mean, a number of those sides in pot one they've taken on in recent times. Of course, Real Madrid in a few finals. Paris Saint-Germain they had in the group a few years back. Bayern Munich, you mentioned that reunion potentially with Sadio Mane. They probably the three to avoid in pot one.
Yeah. PSG as well, it's tough. Like Real Madrid's the big one because they always find a way to do it in European competition. It's like Liverpool even had them in the group stages under Rodgers. You think, maybe these two games when it's early on doesn't matter. And you got battered at home, put out a second string at Bernabeu and still lost. You're going to have to face one of the tougher teams, you'd imagine. Like it'd be certainly fortuitous if you got Frankfurt. Porto or Ajax wouldn't be too bad. Like Liverpool have got good memories of playing Porto a number of times under Klopp. beat Ajax in the group stages a couple of years ago as well. But like PSG, you're up against Mbappe, Neymar, Messi, Bayern, it's Sadio Mane. We all know how good he is. And Real Madrid is just, will Liverpool ever get that monkey off the back? Will they ever get the better of Real Madrid?
I mean, a few people in the comment section, it's really splitting opinion, Matt, as to whether Liverpool want to draw Real Madrid. I mean, exact immediate revenge for what happened in the final, obviously lost to them in Kiev as well. Or would you rather meet them perhaps in the knockout stage and dump them out there? I mean, they have had the upper hand over Liverpool, not even just last season, the year before, of course, in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, I mean, it's inevitable that Liverpool are going to play them at some point again, but I don't think necessarily I would call it revenge if Liverpool beat them in the group stage. I mean, both teams could still go through, couldn't they? So, yeah, let's save that one for the knockout phase, maybe even the final again. I think both of those teams will be right up there in terms of the latter stages of this competition. I look at it, and obviously they can't get Manchester City. That would be another tough one, but Bayern Munich would be one that you'd avoid. PSG, I think Liverpool should be able to beat, but then it's it's still kind of one of those glamour ties.
Not the way they're defending at the moment.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, yeah, I mean they struggle to beat any of these teams the way that they're playing at the moment. But you'd assume that at some point that's going to turn, and even then, if they play well against a couple of those teams, you'd still fancy them. But I just look at that list and immediately Frankfurt stand out. Milan, we saw how easily they beat them last season. Porto and Ajax as well. They've had those before and done okay against those. I just think at this stage, what's the point in sort of going for a big glamour tie and a difficult one? Just save those for the knockout phase. Make sure Liverpool are in that knockout phase first and foremost, and kind of go from there, really.
Who's the team then, Matt, to avoid in pot 3?
Dortmund, without a shadow of a doubt. I think Inter are excellent as well, but Dortmund really. I think there's been better Dortmund sides over the past few years. I don't think they're necessarily at the peak. I think maybe not quite as bad as what some people might look at it. I know obviously Bayern dominate the Bundesliga, but I still think Dortmund would be a tough one, particularly away from home, and particularly as well with the kind of Klopp narrative and that kind of thing. I think that would kind of play into it as well. So I'd want to avoid that one. So yeah, Inter, Napoli. I think Napoli look decent so far this season. I've not seen much of them, but from what I've heard, they've started the season pretty well. So yeah, there's still a couple of decent teams in there. But again, you're looking at one or two obvious names. I think Salzburg would be one that Liverpool had definitely taken. Sporting and Leverkusen, I think you'd fancy them to be brushed aside quite easily as long as Liverpool are back to something like their usual selves.
Yeah, definitely.
I wouldn't mind Dortmund, to be honest. Like, Haaland's gone. Like, even when they have him in there, they've been getting knocked out early. Now you take those goals away. They're not as good as they used to be. You'd like to think Liverpool would have enough about them to get that victory. But
be a nice away trip, wouldn't it? But
yeah, that's true as well.
I just love Theo's immediate put down of them. I mean, equally Theo as well. It would offer maybe an in-person scouting mission for a certain English midfield player, and we know how much Jurgen Klopp enjoys watching a player he then goes on to try and sign.
Yeah, they can hold negotiations, can't they? Make it easy for Julian Ward. Have a bottle of red after the game in Dortmund.
Imagine the scenes. Imagine the scenes after the game at Anfield. If Liverpool get Dortmund and Klopp runs on and puts an arm around Jude Bellingham, I mean, that would be also quite something, wouldn't it?
There's the added bonus as well of if you get Dortmund and you knock them out, maybe, just maybe, after that World Cup, they'll consider selling him in January.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. We talked ourselves into it. Any sides there in pot 4, Theo, that you think could be dark horses?
Club Brugge, maybe. They seem to do okay in Europe and Champions League and stuff. But even then, these teams you expect Liverpool to be able to beat, like Rangers and Celtic, as we discussed. That's going to be a tricky one because of the atmosphere, because you've got the added Battle of Britain. But if it's on paper, Liverpool win all these quite comfortably. Like Maccabi Haifa wouldn't be the nicest away trip. Victoria Pleasant wouldn't be the nicest away trip. But still should have enough, even if you have to grind it out.
Did you just call them Victoria Pleasant? Wouldn't be the nicest place to go.
Wouldn't be a pleasant place to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Pilsen, I think you find they're called, not Pleasant, but yeah.
Yeah, that was it. I finished my sentence anyway.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Producer Pat in the background's got in touch. He says Dortmund Werder ones to fear before the weekend, of course. Werder Bremen coming back to beat Dortmund at the weekend. That an absolutely poor joke. We are getting closer to the draw taking place. The President's Award at the moment is being handed out, and plenty of the ceremony going on ahead of the draw officially getting
Klopp's
underway.
idol, this, isn't it? Statue.
Pardon?
Klopp's idol, isn't it?
One Arrigo Sacchi. Yeah, Arrigo
you just butcher my pronunciation again.
Another pronunciation.
I'm not made for European competition.
No, you definitely weren't. In terms of the Champions League, how much of a priority does it become now? Given the start to the Premier League season for Liverpool, I'm sure having reached the final course last season, it was already very high on the priority list. But does there come a point where actually it's kind of even? Can you prior to the group stage go all in on or prior to the knockout stage, go all in on the Champions League?
I don't think they necessarily have to, do they, at this point? I mean, it's early days to be sort of writing off the Premier League. And I think, it depends on the draw, doesn't it, really? But you'd expect Liverpool to be able to get through any of these groups fairly easily. I don't think it's necessarily a priority of one or the other. I know it's condensed and all the rest of it, but even with, hopefully one or two players coming back from injury and several more still missing, you'd manage to balance that, wouldn't you? I don't think we're going to see Liverpool kind of put all their eggs in one basket, because I don't know. I think that's a bit of a dangerous game at this point.
Well, Greenland says Carabao Cup comes first. Of course, getting Derby in the third round. For that.
Don't play Derby until November, do we?
Champions League will be over by then.
Now, in terms of it, Theo, how high in the list of priorities now for you is the Champions League?
As high as it always is. It's your top two priorities. You reassess it in January, assuming they're in the knockout stages, where hopefully you can sign a couple of good players and then make a charge for all 4 trophies, having not messed it up too badly in August. If they don't pick it up in the league form, then it will become the priority as the season goes on, because you'd expect Man City to be favourites for the title. And then you just expect Liverpool to have enough to get through the group stages. Then players are back from injury after Christmas. You've got the World Cup out the way. You've hopefully signed a couple of players in the winter, and then you can make a proper go of it. But as Matt said, it's far too early to be writing off the Premier League just yet. Liverpool could put 5 past Bournemouth at the weekend and we'll be feeling nice and positive again. It's just early days, and as much as we had a couple of years ago, it's unprecedented times with the pandemic and no fans in the stadiums. This is going to be a bit different as well. The fact that the Champions League games are coming so thick and fast, and the World Cup in the middle of it to break everything up. As we said, it's almost 2 seasons, and then you have a second pre-season whilst the World Cup's going on. It's always a priority being champions of Europe, but it's always a priority being champions of England as well. Whilst at the moment Liverpool don't have the squad to compete for both, you'd like to think in a month's time, 6 weeks' time, they will.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And I suppose on top of that, we've still a week of the transfer window left to go, haven't we, Matt? In terms of that, let's touch on the transfer window just before the draw does get underway. I see your soul just sinking there as I say that. But, yeah, no. Do you think in the remaining week of the window, not if Liverpool will sign anything, but whether it is essential that they do, regardless of whether or not action is taken? What is your stance on it?
It's interesting, isn't it? I saw someone replied before when we tweeted something about the Champions League draw this morning and said, maybe if Liverpool get a slightly harder Champions League draw, maybe they'd be even more tempted to go out and get someone. Maybe that would kind of increase the desperation a little bit, which I kind of see where they're coming from. But I just think at this point in the season, or in the summer transfer window, I should say, it's one of those where, for me, the stance hasn't really changed. I think there's a number of players out there that I think can make that Liverpool midfield area stronger. I think there's a pretty decent argument that they should have maybe been a little bit more ruthless at the start of the summer and maybe said to Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, listen, we'll take offers for you. We'll take a reduced fee. You've only got a year left. You've not really played much last season, even when you were fit. Go and find yourself a different club and go and get a replacement for him who is a little bit more reliable and all of the rest of the kind of things that the Liverpool look for. I think there's definitely a case for them having done that, but the fact that they've not done it at this point, I think it's going to take 1 or 2 more injuries for them to really panic, and then it would be a kind of Ozan Kabak situation of trying to scramble around to try and find someone, which I really don't want Liverpool to be involved in. I think we've seen the mistakes that kind of have happened in that regard. I don't think it's quite at that yet, but they are kind of perilously close to it. I would have done one more midfielder, or one midfielder, not one more, as it is. But I would have done it, a number of weeks ago. There's enough options that have been out there that they could have gone and got, and they've chosen not to. Maybe one or two of those have gone elsewhere now, and they're no longer on the table. I do think they would have benefited from it. I think we all kind of thought that all the way through the summer. I think they've given themselves a lot to do next summer as well by not doing it this summer. But at this point, I just think it's difficult to see them changing, because they will only go for the right player. And if the right player was available, they would have done that weeks ago.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And Theo, what's your take on it? Asked Matt there, but your take on the transfer window and where Liverpool are?
I think these latest injuries, it's almost changed my stance on it, that it needs to be a bit more ruthless from them. Like, they've got the numbers in the squad, but they've got the players with the injury records. And it's like so many times now, you can't rely on them, and they break down. It's like Naby Keita, how many times have we said about him? Oxlade-Chamberlain. Like Roberto Firmino, granted, it's only 1 year he's had the injuries, but he's not been at his best since the start of the season. He's getting older a bit. You think, well, this is going to have to be a change in the guard. Like, they've got rid of some players, like Origi and Minamino. They've sold Mane because he wanted out. And then these are going to be like the next three, aren't they? You'd imagine will go if there's not a breakthrough in contract negotiations. Maybe it just needs to be a bit more ruthless. They should have said, right, go now, as Matt said, with Oxlade-Chamberlain. We'll just get replacements in. But you can't do everything at once. On paper, I agree with Klopp. He's got the numbers in midfield. But if you can't rely on them, they're not available, it's going to end up like it is now. It's no coincidence that when everyone was pretty much fit and avoiding long-term injury, they went for a quadruple. Now it's like down to the bare bones almost. They happen to have a bunch of teenagers on the bench, and there's not really anyone you can bring on. You think that ideally they need another forward, or they need another midfielder. They need something there to give them this spark. It's not just a case of bolstering the numbers. It's like, well, they're going to be so demotivated at the moment. But we saw the difference Luis Diaz made. It's whether you can make a signing who will give them the same lift. But it's a week to go until the window closes. Who's going to be available at this point? Who's a target anyway, who they can make a move for, who they maybe wanted in January or next summer? It would almost have to be like the scenario where they signed Oxlade-Chamberlain from your beloved Arsenal a few years ago, where it's a player who's got like 12 months left on the contract, isn't going to sign a new deal, and the club just decide, you know what, we'll cash in now. You get him for a bit of a cut price at the end of the window, and it's an opportunity that Liverpool can't say no to. I did a piece yesterday saying Tielemans at Leicester, he could be a player like that. He's a good age. He's proven in the Premier League. He can play in number 6. He can play number 8. He offers goals. But at the same time, do I really expect Liverpool to change this stance, having hammered it home so emphatically over the past 2 months? No, not really. But we'll see. Maybe they'll get another injury against Bournemouth, and we'll be seeing, I don't know, Bobby Clark coming on and making his Premier League debut, and it'll be getting that dire, or a centre-back injury. That can put them in a real mess again as well. They are down to the bare bones, and it is going to take some real... They have to be the mentality monsters to get out of it.
That's the thing that makes you think that possibly they could change it, because what they said all summer long really is it's got to be the right player. It's got to be someone who can come in and improve the options that they had. And Jurgen Klopp went through the list of, well, we've got this, we've got that, we've got all of these things. I mean, the one thing he didn't mention was the injury record, which is what everyone was kind of screaming out for sort of rectifying and sorting. But he's right in the sense that they've got lots of all the bits of that midfield puzzle. Obviously, the problem is that none of them are fit at the moment. So maybe that bar has changed now. Maybe the bar isn't that you've got to be better than Thiago, Fabinho and Henderson now, because those players are not necessarily fit. Jordan Henderson has missed, a game. I think he only played 20 minutes, didn't he, against Palace because of that little injury that he had. Maybe it's, a case of the bar now for the right player to bring in is much lower than what it was. Maybe they will change that stance, but it just doesn't seem likely. And I mean, even, Theo mentions Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain there. I think Liverpool massively overpaid for him. I think people forget that in terms of the amount of money. I think it was 35 million with 12 months left on his contract. I mean, that's an insane amount of money to be, splashing out on a player in that sort of situation. I mean, I can't see them doing that again.
Chelsea, though, wasn't it? And Chelsea had a bid accepted, and then it's the homegrown extra pit you put on him, because he wasn't in the England squad, a good age at the time, versatile. But I'm sure Guy will tell us he had injuries at Arsenal.
Yes, yeah, and couldn't necessarily nail down a fixed position as well, which I think he's obviously found that at Liverpool as well. So, even then, you can kind of pick out examples, but spending 35 million on someone like that, I thought was a lot at the time, and obviously no one could have predicted the two long-term injuries he's had since. But even that, it just doesn't come without risk.
Well, the Champions League trophy is on the stage. People will be glad to hear. Hamit Altintop, the ambassador for the final this year in Istanbul, of course. It was due to be there in 2020, but due to the pandemic, of course, it was in Lisbon, then Porto. Last year, of course, in Paris, after initially being St. Petersburg and getting rearranged. Theo, is it destiny that Liverpool wronged the right the wrong of last season by heading back to Istanbul this coming season?
Well, it was meant to be there in 2020, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then they got knocked out to Atletico in that last game before the pandemic struck and we were all locked down. And he got pushed back 12 months and he got moved again because of still no fans. I suppose we could clutch to that straw saying it's just waiting for Liverpool to actually be in a situation where they can go back to Istanbul. But even if they did get to Istanbul, is it really going to top 2005? You're not going to get another 3-3 draw where they come back from 3-0 down. Though that would be the sweetest of revenges if it was against Real Madrid. Yeah, Liverpool had a history with Paris, and that didn't go very well last year. Got history with Wembley. They've got history with so many great stadiums over the continent. It's just because Istanbul is this finest hour in Liverpool's history doesn't mean their name's on the trophy. Third time lucky, perhaps we'll see.
No, it's due to be Wembley next season. So you said they've got history there. Maybe that's pointing towards a Champions League back-to-back triumph that is going to be reeled off. Let's wait and see. Well, the draw is getting very close to starting. The lights have gone down. The players Yaya Toure and Hamit Altintop have gone behind the respective desks to get ready to draw the teams and the groups into which they will be drawn. So just for a refresh before we do get underway, Pot 1, Real Madrid, Eintracht Frankfurt, Man City, AC Milan, Bayern Munich, Paris Saint-Germain, Porto and Ajax. Liverpool can draw any one of those sides apart from Manchester City, of course. Pot 2, Liverpool are in, as to a Chelsea, Barcelona, Juventus, Atletico Madrid, Sevilla, RB Leipzig and Tottenham. Liverpool can't draw any of the sides in the same pot as them. Pot 3, they can take any one of these sides as it stands. Borussia Dortmund, Red Bull Salzburg, Shakhtar Donetsk, Inter Milan, Napoli, Benfica, Sporting Lisbon, and Bayer Leverkusen. And finally in pot 4, Rangers, Dinamo Zagreb, Marseille, Copenhagen, Club Brugge, Celtic, Victoria Pilsen, and Maccabi Haifa. Those the sides then. As the draw is about to get underway. I was gonna pass over to you, Theo, to say, did you want to take that side of it? But as I say, the draw very close now to getting underway. We are just seeing the presentation team go through the pots as we've just done there and explain how exactly it is all going to work. And as you say, Theo, this is the case where for the first round of it, we get very excited of one team being put in a group all by themselves.
Yeah, nothing really to learn here. I suppose it's the only thing is Man City, Liverpool paired with them, the same nights, or are they going to be with one of the other ones? Do they split the Northern?
I don't know. Well, often they're paired with Manchester United, aren't they? But Manchester United aren't there, so they don't play.
They were paired with City last year, weren't they? So
if they're paired with City, whatever side of the draw City are in, they'll be in the same side. If they're paired with a London team, they'll be in the other half. So at least I suppose we can sort of narrow it down. We just don't know for sure which one they've been paired with yet.
Yeah, no, that would make sense, wouldn't it? That they're with City, so the London sides don't end up playing on the same night themselves as well. So we are just having it confirmed that basically a team are drawn out of whichever respective pot. So a pot 1 team will be drawn out of pot 1, and then they are assigned to a group. Of course, groups A, B, C, and D play one half of the draw, so that's the Tuesday night effectively on the first round of fixtures, and then the other half of the draw will be the Wednesday night. And Theo was talking there before, Matt, about kind of the scheduling and whatnot, and Jurgen Klopp we know is very keen on the scheduling. This year, of course, there won't be any Wednesday and then early Saturday games. That's kind of already been explained that the domestic broadcasters aren't going to do that to Premier League sides.
Yeah, and it's something that Jurgen Klopp's kind of asked for a long time. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's sensible for all the teams, really. I know Jurgen Klopp gets a bit of stick, doesn't he, in certain quarters for sort of moaning / explaining the reasons behind why something is madness at certain times, depending on which sort of perspective you want to look at it from. And I do think in this case, obviously, he's looking at it from a Liverpool perspective, but it benefits the other teams as well. And you see that with all the other countries. I think in Spain and Portugal and certain other places, they play on Friday nights to give them an extra day's preparation time for the Champions League. It just doesn't seem to have been the case really in the Premier League. I know you could maybe look at it from the perspective of the Premier League being so much financially better off and so much of a superpower compared to the other leagues around Europe now. It's not necessarily an advantage that they need to take care of, but it is certainly important, and I'm sure for this season it will make a difference. I'm sure Jurgen Klopp will appreciate it, and it just makes sense, doesn't it? If we're asking these players to play pretty much twice a week for the entirety of the season, apart from the first 2 or 3 weeks, it just we've got to sort of have it so that they're being taken care of as much as possible. We can't just keep squeezing out of these players. And the 5 subs thing is the exact same, isn't it? The premise behind it is the same, is that you get the proper rest time and all the rest of it. And I'm sure it doesn't work for everyone. I know Sean Dyche, before he left Burnley, was not particularly happy with that suggestion. I'm sure there are other managers as well around the Premier League, but I think slowly but surely people are starting to get on board with these things. It just makes a lot of sense. Every team is going to have to play a lot of football. And yes, Liverpool, apart from at the moment when they've got so many injuries, have got a much bigger squad than most teams. But, if you're playing a lot more football, you do have to be a little bit sensible. And ultimately, the Premier League and the Champions League will benefit, won't they, if the quality of the matches, the intensity and all the rest of it is as optimal as it can be. I think that makes sense for everyone. So yeah, I'm sure Jurgen Klopp is happy. He doesn't have to have that weekly or every few weeks the spat with Des Kelly on the 12:30 kickoff.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Theo, before we get underway, who are your favourites this year for the Champions League?
When we did our predictions at the start of the season, I said Liverpool, but that's already out the window.
You're a ray of sunshine today.
We've not even had the draw yet.
Real Madrid can't be as lucky as they were last year. We said this every single round last year, that they can't be as lucky. It can't happen 2 years running, can it? Even though it's them and it's Ancelotti. Bayern Munich, I think on paper, we've all said they've had a good summer. Sadio Mane is a great signing, but it's where the Sadio Mane coming in completely compensates for losing Robert Lewandowski. Man City, maybe it'll finally be there. Yeah, I'm just throwing the biggest names at Europe that we say every year. They're always going to be in the semi-finals at least. It's an easy one to say, isn't it? But yeah, you expect City will have a good run of it this year with Haaland's goals, so I'll go with them.
Have you got a favourite that you're going to go for, Matt? The first teams are beginning to be drawn by Yaya Toure and Hamid out on top. But yourself, have you got a team?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one, really. I think there's basically the usual suspects. I think Real Madrid will be up there. Liverpool should be there if they can get themselves playing properly. I think at some point Manchester City or PSG are going to have to get it right. They've spent so much money between them. It's inevitable that they're going to win it at some point. But yeah, other than the usual suspects, I don't think there's really any kind of dark horses these days. I think the big teams that are just so big and so powerful now, it's really hard to look beyond those teams. I think you maybe would look at Real Madrid, Liverpool, City, Bayern. Those are probably your 4 at this stage. But Bayern is a difficult one. I know they've started really well in the Bundesliga, but they're basically going to win the league by Christmas, aren't they? And we've seen that in the past with them. When that's the case, that it can be a little bit difficult then if you've kind of switched off in the Bundesliga to then come into the Champions League knockout stages and really turn it on. I think that'll be pretty difficult for them to do that. Yeah. Other than that, really, I don't think there's any sort of reasons to doubt the usual suspects, really. Like I say, Manchester City will win it at some point, whether that's this year or beyond, up to Liverpool and Real Madrid probably to stop them.
Ajax, Porto and Bayern are the first 3 sides to have come out. They go into groups A, B and C respectively. So early on, Theo, Group C, the one to keep an eye on for Liverpool to avoid?
Or was it then if they're paired with Man City, they're not in that one anyway?
Yeah.
So
they can't be in Man City's group, yeah.
No, but I mean, if they're paired with Man City, that means they're on the other side of the draw from what's already come out.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I know what you're saying now with what you've explained. Yeah.
So that means it's what? Real Madrid. I need them to show the pots again. Oh, we've got them here. What's already come out? Ajax have come out. Bayern Munich have come out. Oh, they could get AC Milan again.
Frankfurt have come out.
So they could get PSG. Yeah. So it's the harder side of it now, isn't it? If they have been paired with Man City, they are going to face one of the bigger names.
Well, no, because Man City haven't come out.
Yeah,
It's
but
Ajax,
they've already done
Ajax.
4. They've already done 4. So Man City are in the other 4. So Man City are in the other side of the draw. So if Liverpool are paired with Man City, they're in that side of the draw.
Oh, they've got to be in that side of the draw, right? Okay, I understand what you're actually trying to get at there. Matt, did you understand that?
Yeah, a little bit. We don't know 100% that they are paired with Manchester City, but I assume that they probably are, given that they were last year, and it would make sense, as we said before. But yeah, we're up to Group F now, aren't we, in terms of drawing them out? So hopefully it should only be a couple of minutes before we get the actual draw, and we can actually see where these teams are.
A couple of minutes. It'll be like 15, won't it? We've got to do an award or something.
Well,
and
that's true.
The introductions.
Got goalkeeper of the season or whatever it is to get through first. But yeah.
I can say some time. Courtois. Easy. Goalkeeper, Courtois.
So far we've got Group A, Ajax, B, Porto, C, Bayern, D, Frankfurt, E is AC Milan, F is Real Madrid, and I believe Group G has just been done as well. With Group G being Manchester City.
Exciting.
Yeah, very exciting these times of it. But it is one of those, isn't it, at this point where you are just trying to anticipate exactly how it goes. But I have to say, for me, Bayern Munich, I don't know about yourself, Theo, but Bayern Munich are the team to avoid.
Yeah, they're due another run at it, aren't they? Sadio Mane started the season so well for them. They've got a lot of talented young players. They're just so dominant in Germany now. It feels like they've had a really good summer. But as I said before, is Mane going to get like 50 goals in a season that Lewandowski gets? But he's the one who's proven it time and time again on the biggest stage in the Champions League. I know Lewandowski, he's won it with Bayern in recent years. But Mane's the one he's a bit younger, a bit more at his peak. They are one of the best teams in Europe, and they probably would be challenging a bit more in Europe if they were in a tougher league, if they had like a Real Madrid or a Barcelona in there, or Liverpool or Man City, if they had that sort of rivalry to keep them on their toes all season long, as opposed to having it done at Christmas time. But with the World Cup here, and it's essentially been 2 seasons, maybe that comes into their favour as well. Like they can have another pre-season effectively and go again. But at the same time, you'd imagine a lot of their squad are going to be competing at the World Cup. Whereas I think from when we looked at Liverpool's, there aren't going to be that too many. And those that are, they're either not going to play much or they're going to be, you'd assume, go home early. So there's so much that's going to come into play here. It's going to be a different year in the Champions League, and we'll see who comes out on top in 10 months' time, 9 months' time, whenever it is.
Matt, looks as though we're going straight on into pot 2.
It does. They've managed to speed things up, which is excellent news. Yaya Toure hopefully doesn't take his time too much with these, and hopefully, like we said before, they get it right. But yeah, it's interesting, the World Cup, isn't it? That could play into it. I think it's interesting with 1 or 2 teams. Like, you never know quite what you're going to get with, say, Barcelona this season, Atletico Madrid this season. Obviously, Liverpool can't draw either of those two in the group phase, but you'd expect that they'd be into the knockout. So that would be certainly an interesting one. But yeah, there's a few interesting teams to keep an eye on, and RB Leipzig, the first one out. I think we get another ball drawn, don't we, to work out which pot they go into. So we'll keep an eye on that one next.
Yeah, they can't be.
It feels like they always play Man City.
Well, they can't be in with Bayern Munich, can they? Because obviously they are from the same league as Bayern Munich. So RB Leipzig.
It's just they're on the other side of it.
Right. Okay.
So they'll be with Madrid, City, PSG, or whoever the first one is that's just gone off screen.
And Matt, you're normally ahead of us on these.
Yeah, Group F it is. So hopefully you've managed to work out which one that is. But Group F,
Real Madrid.
Real Madrid, interesting. Yeah, I mean it was 6-3, wasn't it? I think at the Etihad last year. I think Nkunku scored a hat trick and loads of goals in that one. So that'll be an interesting match, I'm sure. Yeah, some good players in that team.
Yeah, no. Theo, what's your take on that Real Madrid and RB Leipzig?
Rather them than Liverpool. Good luck.
Liverpool have had Leipzig before, though, and obviously pre-season it's pretty much a ritual now to take them on.
Yeah, it's the same with the Red Bull teams, isn't it? But
Rather
we'll
play
be playing them
Salzburg.
now until the summer.
Yeah, no, Salzburg's still there to be drawn for Liverpool, of course. Matt, have we had the next team out?
Yep, Juventus have come out of the hat next. Just unscrewing
Group
the
G
ball
or
now.
H for them, they've said.
So it is H.
That's PSG.
PSG. Group of death is already forming.
Yeah. That should be a good game, though. I think it's nice to see the big ties when Liverpool are not involved in them. I'm quite on board with a PSG Juventus game early doors.
That means if we are paired on Man City side, it's AC Milan.
I'll trust you on that. I've lost count already, to be
I
honest.
don't know. I'm squinting at the screen here. I think if they have been paired with Man City, they're in with AC Milan.
Yeah, and if not, the other half of the group is still all open. Ajax, Porto, Bayern, or Frankfurt.
Tottenham,
we'll find out by which side they put Tottenham.
So, Tottenham, the next team out.
Yeah, so Liverpool are in with AC Milan because Tottenham are in the first four.
Okay, so what we're just seeing that we're waiting for them to be assigned their group, but they are in that first.
They're not going to be in with Man City, but they're in with AC Milan. Divock Origi's coming back to Anfield. Liverpool back to the San Siro for the third time in a year. That'll do. The team they can beat, and it's still a nice name, isn't it? AC Milan in a year where it could be going to the Ataturk again. It's in the stars, isn't it?
There we go. Told you it was destiny. Told you it was destined to happen. So who are Tottenham in with?
Looks like Group D for Tottenham, which is Frankfurt, isn't it? Which is a really, really nice draw for them.
Yeah, that is a kind draw for Tottenham Hotspur.
They can have Napoli or something. Give them someone hard from Pot C.
Of course, who Liverpool beat in 2019 in Madrid in the final, as they are looking to go back to Istanbul this year to see if they can right the wrong of last season, where
they could be one to watch, actually. Tottenham, I think with Conte, I don't think they'll win the league, but you never know really in the Champions League.
So out, so it's official confirmation.
Yep, here we go.
Oh wait, it's saying A, B, or C. We got that completely wrong. Then they're not paired with Man City at all.
There we go. Theo, I wouldn't say we got that wrong, Theo. You were the one very sure in your assertion.
What are you saying last year? They were paired with them. Oh, I suppose United won it last year, though, weren't they?
That's what I said when you said who are they paired with. I said United are the team they've been paired with.
Well, Group A it is. Group A
for Liverpool. So it's Ajax.
That'll do.
Yeah.
No, Divock Origi played for Ajax.
We got anyone we can scout from Ajax as well?
Depends how many of them are still there by that point, to be fair. But yeah, I think that's a decent draw, isn't it, for Liverpool? I know they've
had them a couple of years
before.
ago in the group.
Yeah, it'd be quite nice to mix it up. But that was the COVID season, I think, wasn't it? So I don't think we got that trip. But yeah, I think Ajax would be interesting.
1-0, wasn't it? Home and away, no fans there.
Yeah,
I have to say, Theo, you predicting AC Milan has absolutely done me. Oh,
well, he's Chelsea AC Milan instead.
Yeah, Chelsea.
So
in there.
Let's put a Chelsea hats on. It means they get to reunite with Olivier Giroud.
There we go. Quick thinking on your feet. Well done. Have we had the next team, Matt?
We have Sevilla. We're just about to find out which group they're going into. Again, a team that Liverpool seem to play quite frequently.
Had them in the group on the route to Kiev, no?
Yeah, first season back, wasn't it? First game back, I think, was Sevilla. Group G it is for them.
Was it draws home and away, wasn't it? They threw away like a 3-0, 3-1 lead in one of them.
So Sevilla are in with Manchester City.
Yeah, a decent draw for them, that, isn't it, City? I know everyone in the comments was going on about how easy City get it, but they did get Chelsea in the draw yesterday, didn't they, for the Carabao Cup? So maybe things are changing. Right.
I mean, it's a bit easier when we don't have a YouTube live and I'm just doing it in the car on the way back from the Tranmere game. But I said, I'll give them Chelsea.
Oh, brilliant stuff.
Barcelona, the next team out. So B or C, it looks like, for them.
So is Porto or Bayern?
Oh, be Bayern. Lewandowski back to them. That
would be interesting, wouldn't it?
That would be a very good narrative. I mean, we've got some juicy ties already. PSG taking on Juventus, Leipzig, Real Madrid. I think that one's going to be interesting to see as well. But have we found a destination for Barcelona?
We're about to. Group C.
C. It is.
Group C, so they're in with Bayern, yeah?
Yeah, it's a tasty one. Like I said before, with the Juventus and PSG one, it's one that you want to watch. just got to hope now that those games are not on the same night as Liverpool.
This is the penultimate year of the Champions League in this structure, isn't it? From 2024 is where we're going to have the huge league table.
The Swiss model, as they're calling it, as opposed to the Super League, which it essentially is. But let's not talk about that. That'll just get everyone sad.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, I just was
Sad already.
thinking about it. Yeah, I know you got your prediction wrong.
I was thinking, well, no signings, no wins.
At least when it's one league table, it's easier to draw out.
Yeah, that's true. Barcelona then in with Bayern Munich. So, which teams have we left in this pot?
Chelsea and Milan are in the same group.
So that's where Liverpool were meant to be.
You all agreed.
So the final group then, the final one for this is Atletico Madrid to come out.
Yes.
And they'll go in with Porto. So at the halfway stage then, we've got Ajax, Liverpool have got Ajax, Porto against Atletico, Bayern, Barcelona, Frankfurt, Tottenham, AC, Milan, Chelsea, Real Madrid, Leipzig, Man City, Sevilla, and PSG v Juventus. I mean, Theo, it pretty much at the moment, in terms of pot one and what we looked at, we were looking at Ajax, Porto, and Frankfurt. Liverpool got one of those. It's really at the minute as kind as it could have been.
Yeah, but it means it's still wide open, doesn't it, for the rest of the draw as well? Ajax the only Dutch side in it this year. It's not as though getting an Italian or Spanish team rules you out from playing any of the others. So it's still very much up in the air. But like we were looking at the pots before, and you think, well, Liverpool should have enough to beat these teams. Like that's the reason they're the ones who've been getting to the finals every other year. It's a nice draw on paper. And it's nice to actually get to Amsterdam where fans can go after we get robbed of that trip like a couple of years ago.
Yeah, no, definitely right. We've got a few comments then. Do get your reaction in the chat box. Sorry, I've got one here. Good start for Liverpool, and also same person saying Theo did in dirty there, thinking that Big Divock Origi was coming back to Anfield. That isn't the case. It is Ajax who
save that for the round of 16.
Got. So yeah, we definitely will have to. And immediately, Matt, going on into to pot three as well.
Yeah, I'm loving this. It does seem to have taken a long time to get to this point, but they are getting on with it, aren't they? Which is
these are
good.
I suppose we're already 40 minutes in, aren't we? Since the draw was meant to start. Imagine how much later it'd be if we were doing the awards as well every time.
Yeah, pot three: Dortmund, Salzburg, Donetsk, Inter, Napoli, Benfica, Sporting, and Bayer Leverkusen. So Dortmund decide not to draw, and what any one of Sporting, Leverkusen, or Salzburg would we be taking?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Salzburg would be one that you'd take, but I don't know. Like I said before, it's quite nice to mix it up. I don't think you want three teams that you've already played before quite recently. I think Sporting would maybe be. I suppose Sporting or Leverkusen would be the ones that I'd look at. Just
that'd be a nice reunion with Sebastian Coates.
Yeah, just to get a nice little mix up, really, a change from the usual. But listen, any of these teams, I think Liverpool could be fairly confident about going through with,
Napoli
especially
out.
now they've got Ajax as well. It's not like you're looking at it with, say, Real Madrid and then a Dortmund or someone. They've got a team in Ajax that you think that they'd be able to beat. So this one maybe slightly less important.
Liverpool's side of the draw.
Napoli are into Liverpool's side of the draw, so could be A, B, C, or D for Napoli. Theo, give us a shout when you know.
It is A. In with Liverpool again.
Liverpool with Napoli again. So it's beginning to become a familiar sign for Liverpool.
Napoli will be
and Ajax.
fuming. He hates going Napoli, doesn't he? He's so bored of going there year after year.
Yeah, what was it, 2019-20 that Liverpool last had Napoli, but equally had them the year before as well. So Napoli in with
as well.
Yeah, Napoli in with Liverpool and Ajax. Matt, what do you make of that one?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I think they are a decent team. I mentioned it before. I think they've started quite well in Italy this season. I can't remember the lad's name, but I think he's from Georgia that they just signed that everyone is comparing to Mohamed Salah. So he'll be an interesting one to have a little look at. But yeah, I don't know. It's a little bit disappointing, I think, in that it's Ajax and Napoli now that Liverpool have played before in recent history. It would have been nice to mix it up, but I suppose at the same time, if they get through, you can maybe get some different teams in the knockout phase. I think, it's tricky and it's tough, but we did say that last year, and then Liverpool went and won all 4. So, yeah, one of those. I think, yeah, you probably take it. Could have been better. Could have been a lot worse.
Doherty's just said in our group chat, FFS.
Salzburg have been out. Theo, do we know where they're going?
Chelsea and AC Milan.
Chelsea and AC Milan for Salzburg.
Just looking at the Napoli squad, it's very different, isn't it, to like recent years? Like they've lost Mertens, they've lost Insigne, they've lost Koulibaly. At least there is that difference there. Like the big names that have been part and parcel for their squad for best part of a decade aren't there. It's something a bit different. But then they've got Victor Osimhen. I'm probably pronounced that wrong. The Nigerian lad up front. He's decent talent who's coming through. They've still got Zelensky, haven't they? The one Klopp wanted to sign years ago before he got, was it Genie instead? So there are some familiar names there, but it's a bit different.
And Carlo Ancelotti not in charge. Of course, he seemed to kind of give Klopp a thing or two to think about. Milik, of course, up top as well. He's since moved on as well. They are a different side these days, but Liverpool, looking at it, Matt, albeit it's familiar names, will be pretty confident with what they've drawn so far.
Yeah, I think so. That's the thing, isn't it? You'd look at it and you'd be fairly happy with that. We've just seen Benfica there come out with Juventus and PSG in that group. You're starting to look at a few really tricky groups, and I don't think Liverpool's is easy by any stretch, but I think it's one that you'd be fairly confident that they could get through. Yeah, like we say, it's one of those where it would have been nice to mix things up, but at the same time, if Liverpool can get themselves through, maybe with a game or two to spare like they did last season, then it doesn't really matter, does it? You'd fancy them to be able to beat those teams.
Yeah, no, most definitely. In
Dortmund for City.
Dortmund in with Manchester City, so Erling Haaland immediately going back to Dortmund. They've got Sevilla in that group as well. That's one that is beginning to look a little bit tasty.
Yeah, Jude Bellingham to Man City confirmed. Yeah, be interesting.
Is that going to be on the .com website in a couple of hours?
No one clip that up.
Theo, what's your take on that? Dortmund, Man City. They played each other in was that the quarterfinals a couple of seasons back, or was it last 16?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
They've been in a group together as well, haven't they?
Yeah. It's one where these are decent names in European competition, Seville and Dortmund, but at the same time, the level below City will get through that group. City will probably be top of that group. They might have an odd slip up or a couple of goals conceded that they wouldn't like, but you get those mistakes out of the way in the group stages, they'll still find a way to get through and rock into the round of 16.
Bayer Leverkusen out as well. They're into Group B, are they, Matt?
I don't know, to be honest. I've missed that, doing something else, but Sporting are out next as well. So, yeah, we shall soon
You're
find
doing
out.
Bellingham's Man City tweets, weren't you?
On the burner account.
I believe Bayer Leverkusen are into Group B with Porto and Atletico Madrid. So just awaiting a few more of the sides. Bayern and Barcelona awaiting who they'll face. Frankfurt, Tottenham, and Real Madrid and RB Leipzig yet to have their opponents drawn. Where have Sporting headed, Theo?
Group D, Tottenham.
So Tottenham have Frankfurt and Sporting Lisbon. Favourable group for them.
Shaping up quite nicely, that, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I saw someone in the comments before said Frankfurt are decent, and they are decent, but I don't know. I think there's a good few teams that you could have got that were worse than that. I do think Tottenham will be able to get through that. It is interesting with Tottenham. You don't kind of think of them as being a Champions League team, but of course it's not that long since they got to the final. They can do things, I think, in Europe with some decent players, good manager as well. Like I said before, I think the Premier League is the Premier League's probably out of sort of Tottenham's reach this season, just in terms of City and hopefully Liverpool as well. But it wouldn't surprise me if they went quite far in the Champions League.
So the final team to be drawn then will go in with Barcelona and Bayern Munich, and that's Inter Milan. So that is a heavyweight of a group. That
some big names,
big team in Europa League.
Yeah, possibly Barcelona again, like it was last year, but we have to see.
Yeah, so what are you looking at the moment, Theo's group of death? Group H has got PSG, Juventus and Benfica, and that Group C, Bayern, Barcelona and Inter Milan. They're the two biggies at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. What you do notice is the English teams seem to have got it quite nice so far, and it's not going to get too trickier with pot 4. Like you might get a Battle of Britain coming for one of them. But it's nice enough. Like it's not really a surprise to see all 4 in the knockout stages, but the fates have been kind to them. And you're getting a couple of big names knocked out along the way here as well with these groups of death. While it might not be competition favourites, it's still teams that have got a hell of a lot of European Cup names on their wall of honours.
Well, pot 3 is completed. Then we'll be on to pot 4 shortly. And before we get that, then Matt, let's have a look at the teams in pot 4: Rangers, Dinamo Zagreb, Marseille, Copenhagen, Club Brugge, Celtic, Victoria Pilsen, and Maccabi Haifa. I mean, 3 of those teams Liverpool haven't faced before. Given they've got Ajax and Napoli, is that what we're looking at? Those sides they haven't faced before, to hope that maybe it's a new destination for Liverpool to head to?
Yeah, I'd like that to be the case. I'd certainly like that to be the case. I think there's 1 or 2 decent trips in there as well. Look, a visit to Copenhagen or Bruges wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I think, be interesting to kind of see where Celtic and Rangers end up. I think those are 2 teams that you'd keep an eye on. I think that those could be trickier places to go. We've seen, Celtic in the past few years, over the last decade or so, do a couple of bits in Europe. It's good to see Rangers back as well. Obviously, the work that Steven Gerrard started there, I think that will be a tricky place for anyone to go. But I think for all of these teams, the group to avoid is that Munich, Barcelona, and Inter one, isn't it? I think if any of these teams gets in, well, one of them will obviously, but whichever one it is that goes into that group is probably not going to be particularly pleased.
Liverpool Celtic one.
Celtic
one.
Yeah.
I still remember getting knocked out in the UEFA Cup by them in 2002-3.
Yeah.
Where Heskey scored at Parkhead and then they won 2-0 at Anfield. I think they went to the final that year, lost to Mourinho's Porto. Oh, Celtic first out. And then we all know what Porto did that year. And then the year after, that should have been a trophy for Liverpool. Like, realistically, if you knock out Celtic, you're going all the way to the final. And it was just a difficult season for them. Feels a bit long for me to have this grudge, isn't it? 20 years. But young Theo in his bedroom wanting Celtic to get battered so Liverpool could get another European trophy.
I wouldn't expect anything less for you to hold a grudge for over 20 years, to be perfectly honest. Have we got? You said Celtic are out. Where are they going?
Just about to find out.
It is Group F.
Group F for Celtic: Real Madrid, RB Leipzig, and Shakhtar Donetsk. That's one of the Battle of Britain possibilities gone. Rangers, though, still there, Matt.
Yeah, 1 down, 1 still to go. I think that's a tough one, right? I mean, all of the groups are going to be tough, aren't they, for these teams? But I think for Celtic, I mean, Real Madrid, an away trip there is probably no bad thing. But yeah, I have to say, I can see the appeal of Liverpool getting one of Rangers or Celtic, or Rangers now as it is. But yeah, I'd personally rather avoid that, I think.
And that means it's 1 in 4 to get Rangers, because they will be on the opposite side of the draw to Celtic.
Yeah, so Rangers is still very much a possibility.
Yes,
Marseille are next, but then they are in Liverpool's side of the draw as well.
So Marseille side again, who Liverpool have faced, 2008-9? Was that the most recent meeting? Or was...
It felt like they had them a couple of times under Rafa. There was like they had them in 07-8 because they battered them 4-0 to qualify, because they'd had a really shocking, I think, first half of the group stages. Marseille and Tottenham.
Yeah, I was going to say they're not going to be drawing Liverpool. It's Sporting, Tottenham, and Frankfurt in Group D then. So Group D and Group F have been completed. All eyes, though, on Group A is where Liverpool are. They've got Ajax and Napoli in there. We are just awaiting to see who will complete the group, but it is at the moment looking favourable for Liverpool. Next side out.
Copenhagen.
Let's wait and see if Copenhagen are the side that Liverpool will get.
Again, Liverpool side of the draw. Or is it? Oh, no, they've got a few more. They can be in 6.
Oh, they're starting to slow down at this point, aren't they? I think they're getting tired.
Yeah,
it was all fast at the start.
Yeah, Touré's beginning to wane out of match practice.
Transfer news from across Stanley Park. Dele Alli to Besiktas confirmed.
What a move.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Theo.
Just to kill some dead air from them dragging this out.
Copenhagen.
Group G. Manchester City's group, Copenhagen.
City is true.
Sevilla, Dortmund, and Copenhagen for Manchester City. The English sides, as you said before, Theo, done really well. Tottenham's group's complete. They've got Frankfurt, Sporting, and Marseille, and Man City now with Sevilla, Dortmund, and Copenhagen.
They're all pretty close as far as they can go geographically as well, aren't they? They're not going to have anything that's too difficult for them in between games. Like we said about the middays on the Saturdays are gone. But yeah, they got it kindly, and it's like they should be through to the knockout stages anyway. But this makes it even simpler for them, you'd like to think.
Yeah. Liverpool still can get Victoria Pilsen, though, Theo. Be a pleasant one for you.
Yeah, it would be very pleasant.
Have we got the next team out?
We do. Club Brugge are the next ones out, so just about to find which group they're going into.
Is the Simon Mignolet reunion possible? Will Liverpool?
Group
B.
No, Group B. There we go. In with Atletico.
He's got a nice group, hasn't he?
Porto and Bayer Leverkusen.
He's going back to Madrid.
Atletico Madrid.
Happy memories.
But Atletico Madrid are probably the standout side in that. It is beginning to take shape that actually there's probably a standout contender in most groups. But the rest of them, of what have been completed so far, are all fairly even. Maybe Group F aside, you'd fancy Real Madrid and Leipzig to get past Shakhtar and Celtic, but the rest of it is looking very open.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a Group B there. I mean, Porto are a team that have been, I think, a little bit unlucky from memory in terms of the groups that they've got at certain times, or they've drawn Liverpool in the last 16. Maybe they're looking at that one, and Bayer Leverkusen and
50-50 here on Rangers, by the way.
Yeah, Rangers can even get into Liverpool's group, or Barcelona, Bayern, and Inter Milan.
Yeah, difficult either way, I think, for them, isn't it? But yeah, Porto would be interesting, I think, in Group B. I think that's one to watch out for. Group A it is.
Battle of Britain.
Rangers then for Liverpool. So a trip to Ibrox in the offing. That completes Liverpool's group.
The Ben Davies derby.
Union with Ryan Kent and Ben Davies.
Yeah. Ajax, Napoli, and Rangers. Theo, your immediate thoughts?
Out of the two Scottish teams, I'd have preferred Celtic. I know they're the champions, but Rangers, they've seemed to have been so good in European football. They just have a way, first under Gerrard and then Van Bronckhorst, of define the odds coming through these knockout ties. And I suppose it's a little bit more favourable that it's a group stage rather than two-legged knockout affair. But it's going to be a great occasion. Obviously, both fans are going to travel in good numbers. Go to Ibrox, Rangers back at Anfield. Kai Delaney and I were at Ibrox for a Legends game for the Echo a few years ago, and that was a nice enough atmosphere. I think it was weird seeing Gerrard play in blue for a bit in that one, but there are a few angles there. It's almost a shame that Steven Gerrard decided that he should go to the Premier League with Aston Villa. It would be even nicer if he was still there, but they've got some good players. It's going to be a tricky tie, but one Liverpool should get through.
Yeah, well, finally as well, Matt, see Ben Davies play at Anfield.
yeah.
We've seen him play at Anfield. He had a friendly.
Yeah.
Now, Matt, your thoughts then on the group as a whole?
Yeah, look, it's good. I think that it's been a little bit mixed up with that last team. It's a little bit similar from what we've seen in previous editions with the other couple of teams. The one thing I would say is it's a little bit like Manchester City. You're not looking at having to travel very far, particularly Rangers. That's a really close one, but the other two as well. It's not that far to go. I think, hopefully if Liverpool do have a couple of players back from injury in the next few weeks, you can then start to look at kind of making one or two changes for these matches. And I think that would be important. I think generally speaking, Liverpool will be pretty happy with that. And you'd expect, on paper at least, for them to be able to sail through and hopefully get that done with one or two games to go. But it'd be interesting, in terms of the order and stuff. We've got to sort of wait to see, whether they're home and away first and which sort of order these come out in. But you'd maybe want to get a home game out of the way first, maybe get 3 points on the board. You maybe wouldn't want to go away to Rangers first or something like that. But yeah, I think overall Liverpool can be fairly pleased with that.
And Theo, in terms of the group as a whole, we've seen Rangers come out as the final team. A bit of variety for Liverpool, but Ajax and Napoli, two sides they know well.
Yeah, reasonably well. Ajax isn't too far to go to either. It's only like an hour on by plane. But they're good names in European competition without being the elite heavyweights that give you a proper group of death. And it should be games that Liverpool fans can enjoy, good occasions on the pitch where they'll see a decent contest, but one that the side should come through. That having played Ajax a couple of years ago, they'll know all about them. Napoli's, like we've said, it's a little bit different to the Napoli of the past, but it's still a good test. And it could have been so much worse when you saw some of those teams in Pot A, for example, or a couple of the heavyweights in Pots. Was it Pot C? Whatever. Have I got the letters wrong here? Is it numbers? I've already Pot 1 and Pot 3. But yeah, it could have been so much worse.
Yeah, you were right. Pot C, which is finished off with Victoria Pilsen going in there with Bayern, Barcelona, and Inter Milan. We'll run through the options or the groups for some of the other English sides as well, Matt. But in terms of drawing Napoli, Theo mentioned it there. It is different to the Napoli of recent past that Liverpool have faced. Carlo Ancelotti, of course, not there, but a number of the players having moved on as well. And I suppose the years in which Liverpool did face them a few times in a row, or 2 out of 3 years that Liverpool faced them, they were really Serie A title challengers at that time. More recent seasons, they've fallen away from that pace.
Yeah, I think in recent times they have. It'd be interesting to see how they kind of get on really this season. I think it's a little bit more open, isn't it, Serie A at the moment? Obviously, Juventus had gone on that run, but that seems to have stopped, and they seem a mile off it. And you look at the 2 Milan clubs, Napoli, I think, should be trying to enter that conversation. I think going away to Napoli is never going to be easy, but if Liverpool can win, kind of you'd expect on paper at least that they can beat Rangers home and away. Ajax, they've already proven in recent seasons that they can do that home and away, even if it's only a narrow win. You are looking at that and thinking across those 3 teams, Liverpool should be able to get enough points to be able to comfortably top that group and get themselves through. And I just think looking at the draw as a whole, we mentioned that City have maybe done okay there with Sevilla, Dortmund and Copenhagen. You'd look at 1 or 2 of the other groups though, and I don't think Liverpool can have any complaints really. You look at Inter, Barca and Bayern being in the same group, PSG, Juventus and Benfica in the same group. It could have been a lot worse for Liverpool, and I think they should be fairly comfortable and fairly confident with the teams that they've got drawn out there.
Theo, do you think it has any impact on the transfer window? Whether Liverpool had drawn a tougher group, would that have forced maybe decisions in the transfer market?
I don't think so. I think the only way the Champions League could potentially have an impact on transfer business is the teams that got knocked out in the playoff round. Like you have players there that might have been wanting to play in the Champions League, got knocked out and have to be in Europa. We'll be looking for transfers. Maybe one of them can become available. I know Liverpool have been linked earlier in the summer with, was it Sangaré at PSV? But at the same time, he signed a new contract this summer. So maybe that's not going to be one that can be too easy to sort out. With a side like Liverpool, when they plan so far in advance, you wouldn't expect them to make a knee-jerk decision off how tough the Champions League group stage draw is, like thinking, we need an extra forward to get through. You certainly don't want that to be the case. Like, whilst you want Liverpool to still sign a couple of players, it's still reassuring that they are so organised or have got this plan and vision in place, and then it just has to be judged on the pitch. Like I said, it's a pretty straightforward group to an extent. At least it's also, if there aren't any players they're interested in from Rangers or Napoli or Ajax, and it would delay negotiations until January, because you imagine they want to sell anyone like that now. But Liverpool weren't in that situation anyway. And then with Rangers, I think it's actually fresher than we thought. Like, according to LFC history, never played a competitive game against them. They've had a couple of friendlies, but Rangers haven't been at Anfield since 1924 apparently. So they'll enjoy that day out even more. I think remember friendlies in recent years under Rafa. I think there was one under Kenny as well. Liverpool battered them 4-0 at Ibrox and then lost in like a weird winter game in 2011 because they weren't in Europe when Dalglish took them to like the 2 domestic cup finals. So it's still over 10 years since they last played them. I'm encouraged to enjoy even more.
Yeah, we were talking sort of as soon as the draw concluded, Matt, about Rangers. They were the last team out. Is that for you the headline of the draw for Liverpool? A battle of Britain, as it were, with Rangers?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the one that I think will be the kind of narrative, not least because, as Theo says, it's completely new, isn't it? It's not a team that Liverpool have faced for a long time, which is a little bit interesting. I think the more I think about it, actually, the less it kind of matters that Napoli and Ajax have played Liverpool in the recent past. Like you're saying, there's been quite a few changes with Napoli. There's been quite a few changes with Ajax as well. You think of, obviously, their manager is completely different now. Liverpool have already faced him this season with United. There's lots of players that have left them. You think of Ryan Gravenberch has gone. There's Manchester United seemingly after all of them, Anthony included. So be interesting to see kind of what happens with them. There could be a few more changes depending on what happens for the rest of this transfer window. They're going to be an interesting team, but I think Liverpool should be able to beat them. I think you can basically say that about all the teams, can't you? I think Rangers will be an interesting one. A couple of players there, like we've mentioned in Ryan Kent and Ben Davis, but ultimately these players were nowhere near good enough for Liverpool. So by that sort of logic, Liverpool should be able to go there and beat them. But yeah, Rangers definitely the biggest narrative, but I think there'll be some good games in that group for Liverpool, but the main thing really is that they can get through, can't they? They'll be overwhelming favourites to top that group, and they sort of back themselves, I think, to do that within 4 or 5 fixtures.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Let's take a wider look then at the conclusion of the draw, Theo, and talk about some of the English sides and who they've drawn. Tottenham are in Group D. They've got the Europa League winners Eintracht Frankfurt. They've got Sporting Lisbon and Marseille. That seems fairly pleasant for them. Group E is where Chelsea are. They've got AC Milan, Red Bull Salzburg and Dinamo Zagreb, and Manchester City with Sevilla, Dortmund and Copenhagen. Which one of the other English sides do you think has got the most favourable draw?
Probably Tottenham. On paper, those sides are easier. They've got a world-class manager in Conte now. They've had the experience of getting to the final a few years ago. I think that they should come through that pretty easily. Chelsea, Liverpool found out with AC Milan last year, they're a big name, but they're not as good as they were 15, 20 years ago when it was just world-class player after world-class player after world-class player. So Chelsea should top that group, and you'd imagine Milan will get through it as runners-up. And City, they're just streets ahead of anyone, really. So it doesn't matter that it's Seville and Dortmund. They'll still find a way to get through that, probably in top spot with one of the others joining them. But out on looking at this, you'd expect the 4 English teams to top their groups, and then draws open for if Liverpool are top, who they get as runners up. There are some tough groups here, so you're going to get a massive side as runners up in Group H with PSG and Juventus. You're going to get a big team as runners up in Group C with Bayern, Barca, and Inter. Yeah, it's all there. It's all to be determined. We'll know more in mid-November when we see who gets through. But it's been a good draw for the English teams. Should expect to see him in the round of 16, and then maybe we'll go from Battle of Britain to Battle of England for the quarterfinals onwards.
Yeah, the Champions League start in less than 2 weeks. The 6th of September is when the group stage gets underway and finishes by November the 2nd. Matt, it looks really intriguing and interesting. Theo mentioned a few of the big hitters of some of the other European sides in there. What's your take on the English sides? And equally, is there a side you can look at in that group stage and say, actually, that draw is really favourable for a side who maybe we didn't fancy all too much, who things could open up for? You mentioned Porto before, but Group B looks as though it's wide open for maybe a dark horse to emerge from there.
Yeah, Group B I think is open. I don't know that much about Leverkusen these days. I think they could be one that possibly take a few people, myself included, by surprise. I think I'd look at Group E as well. I mean, you'd expect Chelsea to get through there, but Salzburg, I think, got through to the knockout phase for the first time, didn't they, last season, I think? AC Milan, I think they would have been disappointed with what they did last season, with obviously being in the group with Liverpool and Atletico. So, yeah, I'd expect them to have a bit of a go at it. You'd look at Group F as well. I think Leipzig, they're one that has kind of either not done particularly well or gone quite far in the competition. I think they'll be looking to kind of build upon that. Again, it's not an easy group with Shakhtar and Celtic, obviously Real Madrid favourites in that one. But I think Leipzig is one that possibly, depending on kind of what they do for the rest of this transfer window, who they keep, and if they can get anybody else in, they could be a team to watch. And yeah, I suppose there's kind of the two sort of groups of death, if you like, in C and H, but the other ones are, maybe you've got a team like a Liverpool or a Chelsea or Manchester City that you think could possibly sort of run away with it at the top, but possibly the other two, the other three teams could be a little bit more even within those. So yeah, it'd be interesting to kind of see who gets through. But I think just looking at the English clubs, you'd expect those to kind of sail through fairly easily. You'd probably think Real Madrid will get through fairly easily. you'd imagine that PSG could possibly do that, though Juventus, a bit more of a task for them. But yeah, I think for the English teams as a whole, I think it's probably worked out quite nicely for them. And it probably just sets up really what we said right, an hour or so ago at the start of this stream. It was, I think, fairly obvious for me that the English teams would be right up there in terms of the competition as a whole. Real Madrid as well, Bayern Munich in there. The draw really hasn't changed my mind on that. If anything, it's probably made that slightly more likely.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Well, that's all we time for then here on the Blood Red channel. Thanks for joining us for the live Champions League draw and our reaction here on the channel. Liverpool in Group A with Ajax, Napoli and Rangers. Thanks for joining myself, Guy Clark, Theo Squires and Matt Addison. Until next time here on the Blood Red channel, it's goodbye for now.